I've worked over 200 cases in the past 15 years. Private homes, old hospitals, even an abandoned prison once. Most of them had logical explanations. A few had unsettling truths. But one case still gives me nightmares. It was the only time I thought I wasn't going to make it out alive. It started with an email from a woman named Christine. She lived in northern Vermont, in a rural farmhouse built sometime in the early 1900s. Her message was short, desperate. She said, "Something's wrong here. My husband isn't the same. The house feels angry. Please help us." Normally I do a preliminary phone call to gauge if the case is legit. But something in her voicemail recording, this weird, hollow tone, almost like there was interference, made me uneasy. I packed my gear and made the 6-hour drive. When I arrived, it was just after sunset. The farmhouse sat deep in the woods, no neighbors for miles. The air felt wrong. I've done this long enough to know when a location is off. And this one? It felt predatory, like the trees themselves were watching. Christine answered the door. She looked exhausted, pale, dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. Her husband, Mark, stood behind her, completely still, eyes fixed on me, like he was trying to figure out what I was. No hello, no expression, just blank, unreadable. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard it, a low, humming sound. Faint, like it was coming from under the floorboards. Christine didn't seem to notice it. I asked her how long this had been going on. She said it started 2 months ago after they'd found something buried in the woods behind the house. An old wooden box, about the size of a loaf of bread, sealed with twine and strange carvings. Mark had opened it, despite her warning. I told him not to, she said, voice trembling. There was something inside, not alive, but not right. Since then, things had escalated fast. Doors slamming, objects vanishing and reappearing, animals avoiding the property entirely. And Mark? He'd become distant, violent even. She showed me a gash on her upper arm, said he did it in his sleep, but he had no memory of it. I set up my equipment, EMF detector, thermal cam, EVP recorder, and started a base sweep of the house. The EMF was fluctuating wildly in the basement, even though there were no outlets or wiring down there. But what really set me on edge was what I found under the stairs. Etched into the foundation wall, hidden behind loose insulation, was a series of symbols I'd only seen once before, in a case down in Louisiana. Back then, they were linked to a ritual involving summoning, specifically of a watcher, a being that doesn't enter our world fully, but instead latches onto someone, watches, manipulates, feeds on them, and that's when it hit me. Mark wasn't possessed. He was being drained, hollowed out from the inside. I told Christine not to let Mark back into the basement under any circumstances. He hadn't been down there for a few days, she said, ever since he started saying things like, "It's waiting," and "the light hurts." At that point, I knew I wasn't dealing with a regular haunting. This was parasitic. That night, I stayed in the house, keeping watch from the guest room upstairs. Around 2:14 a.m., I was woken by a sharp, metallic banging from below. Not footsteps, not doors. It sounded like something was slamming its fists on the pipes beneath the floorboards. I crept out into the hallway with my thermal cam. It was dead silent for a few seconds. Then I saw it, at the end of the hallway, standing outside the master bedroom, a tall, lanky figure with limbs too long for its body. No heat signature, just a silhouette colder than anything else in the house. As I moved toward it, the door flung open from inside. Mark rushed out, his eyes bloodshot, mouth slightly open like he was in a trance. He didn't even register me. He just walked straight past me and started heading toward the basement stairs. Christine screamed after him, but he didn't stop. I caught up to him just before he descended and shouted his name. That's when he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. It was deep, guttural, layered. It said, "You don't belong here." I held my ground, held up the iron-tipped cruciform I always carry. That thing, whatever had latched onto him, hated it. He flinched, hissed, and stumbled backward. I took the chance to push him away from the stairs. He collapsed, unconscious. We locked the basement that night and moved Mark into the guest room with me. Christine was too scared to sleep. I reviewed the audio from the EVP recorder I had left in the living room. Most of it was static and creaks. But at 3:06 a.m., I heard whispering, a woman's voice. It said, "He opened it." We are inside now. I felt sick. This wasn't an attachment. It was an infestation, and not just of the house. Whatever was buried in that box had invited them in. Plural. I called a trusted contact of mine, an old folklorist who used to work with the Vatican's independent research team. I emailed him photos of the carvings on the box and the symbols from the foundation. His reply came an hour later, just 2 lines. "Burn the box. Leave the house immediately." But I couldn't just leave. Christine was terrified. Mark was barely responsive. I told her we had one shot. We needed to burn whatever was brought out of that ground and close whatever was left open. That night, we went into the woods together. The forest behind their property was dense and unwelcoming. Christine said Mark had started going there at night, barefoot, sometimes humming to himself. The kind of humming that sounded like it wasn't for anyone human. We carried the box, wrapped in heavy cloth, soaked with salt water and holy oil. I also brought a small bundle of mugwort and my iron knife. It was raining lightly, enough to drown out the sounds of our footsteps. But as we got deeper into the trees, we stopped hearing rain entirely. No dripping, no birds, just a low vibration, like a pressure building in your ears before something explodes. We found a clearing where the soil was loose, black and damp, still soft from when they dug the thing up. That's where I made the fire. Christine stood back with Mark, who seemed dazed but calm for the first time in days. I dropped the box into the flames and waited. At first, nothing. The wood hissed and cracked. Then came a high-pitched screech, not from the fire, but from somewhere around us. Dozens of whispering voices, a rustling like bodies brushing through the trees from every direction. Mark suddenly clutched his head and dropped to his knees, screaming, "It's not done! It's not done!" I pulled him up and shoved the iron knife into his palm, forcing him to grip it. Sometimes, when the possession is partial, cold iron can shock the host back into control. It worked. He gasped and collapsed again, breathing heavily like he'd just come out of a nightmare. The flames surged. For a split second, I saw faces in the fire, stretched, featureless, howling. Christine looked away, crying. I forced myself to keep watching. I had to know it was working. Then it happened, a blast of wind from behind us that extinguished the fire in one violent gust. Everything went dark. No embers, no heat, just steam and silence. For a moment we stood there, not sure if it was over. Then Mark stood up, looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "Thank you." He was back. It didn't follow them after that. I stayed one more night, just in case. Mark remembered fragments, dreams mostly, of a man in a mask made of roots standing over his bed, of whispering voices that told him things about his childhood no one else knew. Christine later emailed me a few weeks later. She said the basement stayed quiet, and they were finally sleeping again. But she also said something else. When they tore up the rest of the old foundation, they found more carvings, and another box, smaller, sealed with wax. They didn't open it. They buried it deep in the woods and never went back. That case nearly ended me. I've seen a lot. Exorcisms, violent hauntings, even cases of full-body possession. But that one stuck with me. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it started with something small. An innocent act, digging up the past. Sometimes, that's all it takes. This story came from someone my cousin knows. He's a retired military officer, served in the Army for over 2 decades. He doesn't talk much about his past, but one night, over drinks at a family cookout, he shared something that visibly shook him. The way he told it, his hands trembled, his voice got low, and he made us promise never to repeat his name. He was stationed at a small remote outpost near the northern borders of Alaska. This was back in the early 2000s. It was one of those low-profile surveillance bases, mostly routine, uneventful stuff. It was always freezing, always dark, and always quiet. Too quiet, sometimes. There were 6 soldiers at the base, including him. Their job was simple: monitor the perimeter, do 2-man night patrols, and report anything unusual. But nothing ever happened there. The only thing that ever tripped the alarms was wildlife or glitchy sensors. That's why when strange things started happening, no one really took it seriously at first. It began with motion sensors going off in Zone 3, the tree line about half a mile from the outpost. It wasn't unusual, except that it happened 3 nights in a row, always at the exact same time. 2:13 a.m. The first night, they wrote it off as a moose or fox. The second night, the 2 soldiers on patrol went out to check. They found nothing, but one of them said he felt like they were being watched the whole time. He joked about it, nervous laughter. But the third night, my cousin's friend was on duty. He and another guy, Corporal Green, headed out with thermal scopes and flashlights. They walked the snowy path leading to Zone 3, radio static in their ears, boots crunching with every step. That's when things started getting weird. Right as they crossed into the wooded area, their radios started cutting out. Not static, complete silence. No white noise, no signal, like someone had just unplugged them from the world. They tried the backup walkies. Dead, too. That's when Green stopped walking. He whispered, "Do you see that?" About 30 yards ahead between the trees, something was moving, but it wasn't walking. It was swaying, slowly, like a person standing still but rocking back and forth, as if hypnotized. He raised his thermal scope, expecting to see the bright white of a body's heat signature. Nothing, just black. He lowered the scope and looked with his own eyes. The figure was still there, clear as day in the moonlight, a pale silhouette, tall, hunched, with impossibly long arms that almost dragged the ground. It wasn't facing them. It was looking away, toward the outpost. They stood frozen for maybe 20 seconds. That's when it stopped swaying and slowly started turning its head toward them, and still, no heat signature. He whispered to Green, "Fall back." Slowly. They turned around, trying not to make noise. But as they backed away, they started hearing footsteps. Not theirs. Something was following them. But when they looked back, there was nothing there. That's when the radios suddenly crackled back to life. The radios came alive with distorted static first, then snippets of the base commander's voice. "Status. Copy. Report. Damn it. Respond." Both men answered at the same time, breathing heavily, trying not to panic as they backtracked through the trees. "We're coming back. Something's out here," my cousin's friend said. They picked up the pace. Every few seconds, they'd glance behind. and every time there was nothing, just empty, snow-covered woods. But something still didn't feel right. Then they saw it again, this time closer, maybe 10 feet behind them. Same pale figure, standing still between the trees. But now, it wasn't facing the base anymore. It was looking right at them. Green froze. "It moved," he said. "I didn't hear it move." Neither of them had. There was no crunching snow, no snapping branches, just a figure that somehow closed 30 yards of frozen forest without a sound. And then it tilted its head, not slowly, not like a curious animal. It snapped its head sideways, like it had no bones in its neck. They ran. They didn't care about being quiet anymore. They tore through the woods back toward the perimeter floodlights. As they reached the clearing, Green tripped hard and fell. The other soldier turned to help, and in that moment, he swears he saw the thing step out of the trees behind them. It didn't walk like a human. Its legs were too long. Its gait was jagged, like it was imitating walking rather than actually doing it. And it was fast. They both made it to the floodlights just in time. As soon as the thing hit the edge of the clearing, it stopped, like something was keeping it from stepping into the light. It didn't look scared. It just stood there, watching. Then it slowly backed away, vanishing into the dark between the trees. The other soldiers rushed outside with rifles when they heard the commotion. But by the time they got there was nothing to see. No footprints where the figure had been. Just Green on the ground, bleeding from his face where he'd hit a rock. They went over the thermal footage the next day. The patrol cams had picked up nothing. Nothing but the two of them running out of the forest like something was right behind them. No third figure, no movement, no anomalies. Except for one weird thing. One of the trees near the edge of the woods. It had no heat signature at all. It looked like a solid black hole in the thermal feed, like something was absorbing all the heat around it. And that tree, it wasn't there the next morning, just open snow where it used to be. Green was different after that night. He didn't sleep on base anymore. Started sleeping in his truck with the engine running and the heat cranked up, even though it was against protocol. Said he didn't feel safe indoors. A week later, he requested reassignment. When they asked why, he didn't give a real reason. Just said he needed to get away from the trees. Said it like they were watching him. He got transferred to a base in Arizona, and then, 2 weeks after he left, he stopped showing up for duty. Just vanished. When the MPs found his truck, it was parked off the side of a rural desert road, doors open, lights still on. But Green was gone. No signs of struggle. No footprints leading away from the vehicle. Nothing. Just one thing left behind. A drawing. It was on the passenger seat, drawn on the back of an MRE box flap. A rough pencil sketch. It showed 2 stick figures under trees, and another tall black figure behind them, with a featureless white face and arms that were way too long. In the top corner, scribbled in all caps, "It followed me." My cousin said military investigators ruled it as a desert disorientation case. Said Green wandered off and probably died of exposure. But everyone in his unit knew that didn't make sense. He'd spent years surviving in combat zones, and no one could explain why the drawing looked almost identical to the one another soldier had made years earlier, when he went missing during a winter patrol at a different base in Colorado. Same trees, same figure, same white face. When I asked my cousin what he thought really happened, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "There's something in the woods, man. Not just in one place, either. It moves, it watches, and it never forgets your face." He retired shortly after that, and he never camped near trees again. So this happened in the fall of 2021. During a solo camping trip, I took up to the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho. I'm a freelance travel photographer. Sometimes I just want to unplug and be away from people for a few days. This was one of those weekends. Just me, my camera, and my old converted Sprinter van. I parked near a trailhead, way off the grid. No other vehicles, no signal. The kind of place where you don't hear traffic, just wind and your own heartbeat. I cooked some canned chili on the camp stove, set up the back of my van for the night, and crawled into my sleeping bag around 11:30 p.m. It started raining just before midnight. A soft drizzle that sounded almost hypnotic on the roof of the van. For a while, I was just lying there, listening to it tap against the metal, with my face lit dimly by the glow of my Kindle. I eventually dozed off, and then I woke up to a soft thud against the side of the van, like something heavy had bumped it. My first thought was that a branch had fallen, but then I heard it again, thump, this time on the sliding door, and then a sound I'll never forget, like fingers dragging along the metal, slow and deliberate. Not an animal, not random. It circled the van, one slow lap around, fingernails or claws scraping lightly against the exterior. I held my breath, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. I didn't have a weapon on me, just a camp knife in the kitchen drawer and a flare gun under the bed. Then silence, dead silence. Even the rain had stopped. I stayed completely still, not daring to move or even breathe too loudly. The van had blackout curtains, so I couldn't see outside, and more importantly, whatever was out there couldn't see me either. But that somehow made it worse. The unknown always does. After about 5 minutes of that terrifying silence, I heard it again. Footsteps, not on gravel, not in mud, on the roof. Whatever it was, it had climbed on top of the van. You ever hear something that's clearly walking, but it just doesn't sound quite right? Like the spacing between steps is off. The rhythm is unnatural. That's what this sounded like. 4 steps across the roof, then 2 back, then a pause, like it was listening for movement inside. I reached under the blanket slowly and grabbed my flare gun. My real gun was back home. I never thought I'd need it out in the woods like this. A mistake I've never repeated. Suddenly, bam, 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 it slammed its weight directly on top, denting the metal roof above my head. I could feel the whole van shudder. Then came a sound I didn't expect. Laughter. Not full-blown human laughter. No, it was more like a dry, clicking chuckle. Like something trying to imitate a laugh and doing a horrible job at it. At this point, I whispered to myself, "This is not a person." I worked up the courage to peek out through a tiny slit in the curtain, just enough to see the side mirror. And in that mirror, I saw it. A pale shape, hunched beside the van, leaning forward like it was sniffing around the wheel well. I couldn't see its face clearly, but I could tell its limbs were too long. It didn't move like a human. I dropped back inside, silent, sweating, praying it didn't notice the movement. Then it stopped. Dead quiet again. I held my breath for maybe 30 seconds, waiting for it to make another move. And then from just outside the van door, a whisper, a real, audible whisper, from something that shouldn't have been able to speak. "Let me in." I froze. That whisper, it wasn't just a sound. It felt like it entered my head, like it bypassed my ears entirely and planted itself directly into my thoughts. Clear, deliberate, and impossibly close. "Let me in." I clutched the flare gun so tightly my knuckles went numb. The air inside the van was so still, yet it felt like time had stopped. Then, the handle on the back door jiggled, once, twice, then it stopped. A moment later I heard a slow, dragging sound against the side of the van. Nails, claws, I couldn't tell. but it circled the whole vehicle, slow and methodical, like it was sizing it up, or savoring the fear. Then bang! Something pounded the rear doors so hard that the van rocked forward an inch. I nearly pulled the trigger out of reflex, but then silence again. Long, deafening silence. And just when I thought it might be over, the engine started. Except I didn't start it. My keys were still in my hoodie pocket. The van shook violently for a second, as if something had slammed down onto the hood. Then it stopped. I stayed inside that van all night, not sleeping, barely blinking, too afraid to even lift the curtain again. Whatever was out there, it wanted to be let in. It could have ripped through that thin sheet metal if it really tried, but it didn't. It waited. It played, like it enjoyed the terror more than the kill. By morning, I finally worked up the courage to peek outside. Nothing was there, but the hood had deep claw marks, as if something had gripped it with long fingers and stared in through the windshield for hours. And on the back door, right next to the handle, was a smear of dark, oily handprint. Except it wasn't a hand. It had 6 fingers. I packed up in minutes and sped off that campsite like the place was on fire. Never looked back. I've camped maybe twice since then, and never alone. And to this day, sometimes at night, when I'm parked somewhere remote, I hear a noise that sounds like footsteps on gravel, and I remember that whisper, "Let me in." And I wonder if, maybe one day, I will.